Today we're going to talk about what it is like sailing on Norwegian Cruise Lines. Now, since 2009, we have sailed a total of 121 days all on Norwegian. We just completed a 26-day African cruise on the Norwegian Dawn, and we thought we would share our experience, talk about the pros, the cons, and what has shifted just in the last couple of years. There is a lot to dig into here, so we've broken it up into the following 14 categories. We're going to talk to you about the dining, the entertainment, onboard activities, cabin and accommodation, the communication between the ship and the passengers. We're going to talk about the crew, the embarkation and disembarkation process, the itineraries that Norwegian offers, the state of the ship, shifts in the dress code, the change between the free at sea and more at sea program, shore excursions, loyalty program, and make sure to stick around to the end of the video where we talk about probably the most important metric, value for money. If you find this video helpful, please go ahead and hit that like button for us. But with so much to talk about, let's jump right in. David, why don't we talk about dining?
Excellent. I think overall, I would say we really like the food on the Norwegian Cruise Lines. This is one of the most important things to many people. I think people really want there to be good food on a ship, and Norwegian delivers. First, let's talk about the pros. One of the things we love is that there is a lot of different venues with a lot of variety. The dining rooms are fantastic. Something new every night. And if you want to spend a little extra, you can go to the specialty dining. We have found that their food is really exceptional. We have enjoyed everything from the Mexican to the steakhouse to the Italian. Lots of good choices there.
One thing we still love about Norwegian is its open dining policy. So whether you want to go to the main dining room or to the buffet, you can go and eat whenever you want to when it's open. You don't have a set dining time. I think a lot of other cruise lines have moved to this model now, but Norwegian is one of the ones that pioneered that, and it's one of the reasons we still love sailing on Norwegian. What do you think about the buffet? We're not really buffet people.
We don't normally eat at buffet. I will say they have a lot of variety.
Yes.
So if you're looking for food, it's available.
The buffet is always crowded, so clearly a lot of people really like eating there.
But I will say it's not my favorite.
We like the experience of being in the dining room, and so that's almost always what we did. Now, some of the cons we should talk about, which I don't think these are big deals, but just to be transparent, obviously the days of having lobster in the dining room are gone. That shifted quite a while ago. But I will say that on this cruise, they had a shrimp night in the buffet, and we walked through and there's this giant plate of shrimp.
We showed up after dinner, but we ate shrimp anyway.
Just because, it was shrimp, like why not? And that was really good.
Yes.
So they do still offer some of that premium food in the free venues, which is terrific. Overall, I think we always had better food in the specialty restaurants, which you have to pay for. Now, one thing, again, this is a big change that just happened while we were on the ship. We did back-to-back cruises, and there used to be, I have to say now, Bamboo was one of the free restaurants. It was always kind of a challenge because it was small and you had to make reservations, and people would always show up and trying to get in without a reservation, us included, sometimes. And so it was like a line and it was kind of crowded. On our second cruise, they shifted it and they've changed Bamboo into a specialty restaurant now. It's got a cover charge. I think it was $50 now to get in. I mean, they redid the menu completely. It looks really nice, but it's kind of sad to lose that
really
free
love
option.
having that option that you can't get anywhere else.
Like, it didn't have the best food in the world, but it was something different that you could go do and have a different experience. So it's sad to lose that, but I kind of get it at the same time because it was kind of a hassle probably for them. The only other thing I'd say is that for us, because we like to do these long cruises and do back-to-back cruises, the food can get a little repetitive because you're going to see the same menus on those back-to-back cruises. That doesn't really bother us. You know, food is very subjective and everybody's going to have their favorites, but I think the food on Norwegian overall is a solid pro.
Now let's talk about entertainment. Let's go right into the pros. Our favorite thing about the Norwegian cruise ships is the production cast.
Yes.
They really hire some very talented people, and we enjoy every single one of their shows.
They also do some really good guest stars who come in, some of the singers. They do have kind of a way of hiring people. Like there's always the guest singer, there's always a magician, there's often the acrobat, the aerialist who come in. We did have a hypnotist, a comedian hypnotist, which we've not seen before. So that was a little bit different. So that hasn't really changed.
I would say there's nothing novel about who they hire and what they present on their stages, but it's always good quality.
Yeah, we really enjoy that. There are, however, some cons, and these are cons that have happened just in the last couple of years where they've made some big changes to how they present entertainment, which we think is kind of a problem. And basically it's just cuts, cuts, cuts. There is so much less. The production cast, which is by far our favorite thing, they do fewer shows. And now they've replaced that and some of the other cuts, I guess, with showing movies in the evening in the theater. We think this is unacceptable as a form of entertainment. Like, I don't care if you want to show a movie in the afternoon or if you want to show it out by the pool so it's something unusual or different, but I want to go see a show in the night. I do not want to go see some random, B Hollywood movie to be my nightly entertainment. I just don't think that's acceptable. So we don't like that. And our last two cruises, post 2020, they've shown multiple movies, which we just don't like. The other thing that we really have a problem with is they've gotten rid of their guest lecturers. This is one of my favorite things.
It was always one of the best things to do during the day was to go see a lecture.
Yes.
We've seen lectures on wave movement. We've seen lectures on the ports themselves. Just some
the
really
animals
nice...
and the wildlife that you're going to see. It's always very interesting. And for some reason, they just don't have that anymore. But they need to bring back the guest lecturers because that is a very valuable thing that I don't know why they've gotten rid of. So overall, I'd say what entertainment is still there is excellent. We're very happy about it, but they need to bring us back to the good old days where they had more of it. Why don't we talk about onboard activities?
So there's tons of activities on board the ship, from shuffleboard to painting classes, all kinds of things, exercise, dance lessons. There are a lot of variety. I'm seeing some things that I hadn't seen in the past, certain classes. I think there's pretty much a full schedule all day long.
Yes.
As long as it's a sea day.
Yeah.
Where you can do all kinds of activities, and they're fun, and the staff that runs them are all very enthusiastic and there to help you have a good time with that activity.
Overall, I think there's a lot to do. We're not really people who participate in a lot of those shipboard activities. We're pretty good at entertaining ourselves, but there is a lot to do, which I appreciate. But there are some cuts that have been made, and this I think probably has to do with cuts in staff, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But one big one that really kind of disappointed us is we crossed the equator and there was no mention of it. Nothing really happened. And then the next day we got a certificate delivered to our room that, said you crossed the equator. It was great. But when we did this a couple of years ago in 2019, there was a party up on the pool deck. Everyone dressed in togas. There was a conga line. They painted our faces. There was a whole ceremony about crossing the equator.
It was fantastic.
It was silly, but it was a lot of fun. And then we got our certificate. And so this time for none of that to happen, it was just a little disappointing. And I think just points out, how that we're kind of losing some of that fun stuff that used to happen, whether it's because they didn't have enough staff to pull it off or just didn't feel like it was important. I have no idea, but it was definitely noticed as a change from what happened before.
Another thing I noticed was that they weren't always prepared for the size of the crowds that came to the activities. I went to 2 different classes that I ended up leaving because they didn't have enough materials for everyone to participate, and that was a little disappointing.
So overall, again, I'd say this is kind of a wash. What they do have is perfectly acceptable, but we would like to see them bring back some of that magic that they had before.
Let's talk about cabins and accommodations. You, of course, want a comfortable place to stay, and we think that they deliver on Norwegian. One of the things we particularly love are they have great bathrooms, big showers,
Yep.
lots of room. lots of space for your things. Throughout the cabin in general, there's a lot of storage space. We've never had a problem. Of course, we don't bring very much, so that might be working on our side. And
I think the cabins, like, they're the same as what they were before. There's luckily been no changes in the cabin itself. One con that I would bring up, but I don't think this is anything unusual, is that I wish there were outlets close to the bed so you could plug in your phone at night instead of having to run a cord halfway across the room or all the way across the room. But other than that, I think we're very
probably
comfortable.
a ship by ship
Yes.
difference depending on how new the ships are.
And the other thing that I will mention is, again, this is a staff issue, but they don't clean the cabins as much as they used to. They used to come in twice and they would clean the cabin in the afternoon and then they would turn it down again in the evenings. They've completely gotten rid of that. They've gotten fewer staff on board who are cleaning the ships. They all have more rooms that they have to clean now. And so they got rid of that service, which isn't the end of the world, but it is disappointing. Next, we just wanted to mention the communication between the ship and the passengers. And I would say I don't think this has ever been something that Norwegian has been very good at. I think they like to not say very much because they don't want to say the wrong thing or promise anything that they can't live up to, and they like to give themselves that wiggle room. We did have a couple of times, though, where the communication was particularly poor. Again, I don't know if this is because of the reductions in staff or if it's just, I'm not sure what the problem was, but like our first day with a tender port, that whole process was just totally mishandled. It's a tender port and it's going to be frustrating. And I think we had a lot of first-time cruisers who didn't even understand what was supposed to happen. But the communication that we received, they were telling people to go places to get ready to go. But then the wait times were very long. And then at one point they started calling a second group before the first group had even started moving yet. And it just kind of turned ugly where a lot of passengers were very upset. And there was no connect between the announcements that were coming overhead with what was happening on the ground. And that was very disappointing to see.
Another thing I'll mention is that on this cruise, we had to turn in and pick up our passports several times throughout the cruise. And we would receive a paper that would tell us what to do, give us our instructions in the evening, and the next day, the announcements would completely be different than what we had on our paper.
Yeah.
So there was no consistency and lines were getting too long and then there would be nobody there at all. So, and that could have been improved with better communication.
Either process would have been fine. It wasn't the process that was the problem. It was just that communication that left people kind of confused and not really trusting what we were being told because we just kept having all these examples of it being different. Where they would say, you know, we had one port where people had to get off in Abu Dhabi to go through in-person immigration, and they made announcements all day long, and they kept saying, this is the final call, and then 20 minutes later, this is the final call, and they made the final call for like 6 hours, and it's just like,
so
why?
No one's going to trust it's the final call after that.
And so the communication was not great. At the end of the day, none of these issues made or broke the cruise. None of them were life or death situations, but it was just a little bit frustrating for us as experienced cruisers. We kind of just sat back and were amused by it, but I hope they get those kind of things sorted out.
Now let's talk about staff. We love Norwegian staff. We always feel so welcomed.
This is probably one of the biggest pros.
They're just so friendly at the front desk, even though you've seen them get yelled at 20 times, they're still helpful and welcoming to the next guest that comes up. They are really terrific, especially in the dining rooms, and we had great cabin stewards who take care of us. We really love the staff.
Now, some of the cons here are, again, pretty obvious. I've mentioned this before, but they have made big cuts in the amount of staff that is there, and it is noticeable where there's just not the same number of people around doing things. Like the cabin steward I mentioned, you know, we didn't get the same service there that we've been used to in the past. The staff that is there is amazing. We just wish there would be more of them. The other issue, and I don't know if this is related, but for some reason they rotated the staff in the dining rooms.
Quite a bit.
And so in previous cruises where we would go and we eat at the same time, we would usually end up in the same section, and we would see the same waiters over and over and over again, and you have a relationship with them, and you get to know them, and they tease you, and it's just a lot of fun. And so this time around, where we had a different waiter almost every night, and they were terrific, we didn't have any complaints, but you just couldn't make that same connection, and we didn't think that was as good as what it's been in the past.
Embarkation and disembarkation. Now, these are things we all have to go through, and so we make the best of it. And on Norwegian, they do a pretty good job.
Yeah, so
We've always been happy. It makes a difference of what port you're on.
Yeah.
The ground staff makes all the difference in
Yes.
the world. We've always had good experiences.
Yeah, this is something I would say hasn't really changed.
No.
Because it's so dependent on where you are that it just is what it is. We had really good experiences. We did talk to other people on our ship, and it's like, wasn't Embarkation so amazing? And they were like, no, it was terrible.
So
this happened and that happened. We were doing back-to-back cruises, so we didn't have to deal with getting on or off the ship in Mauritius, and that looked pretty miserable. There was a very long line out in the sun, and people really complained about that. We didn't have to deal with it in Doha, and then again in South Africa. Very easy. We didn't have any issues. And in fact, our getting on the ship in Doha was probably one of the best we've ever had, but we've talked to other people who did not agree with that and had a much worse experience. I don't know if they got there later in the day or what happened, but I would say it is what it is. I don't think there's been a big change here.
No.
And it's pretty consistent. And the only other thing I will say is that Norwegian used to have priority lines based on status. And so you would go, and people who had high status would have a priority line to get onto. They don't seem to have that anymore. Our last
although
few
it
cruises,
it still says it's one of
it
your perks.
says it,
but
but then
never
when
a
you get
place
there,
to go.
there's only one line. So usually because the embarkations have been so fast, it hasn't been an issue at all, and I didn't care. And that might be because so many more people are cruising now and are getting status, that because we have heard other cruise lines talk about this, where there's just so many people who have status, they can't offer that because it's going to be the majority of people anyway. I don't know if that's the case. There was no communication about it. We didn't have it, but it didn't really affect anything. So just one of those things to think about. Now let's talk about itineraries. And this is absolutely the most important reason we continue to sail with Norwegian, because they are just better than everybody else at making good itineraries and taking us places we want to go. So I had David put together some examples. David, take it away.
Okay, so I decided to take the example of a cruise that we did last year, a Trans-Pacific cruise. I looked at cruises on Royal Caribbean, Holland America, Celebrity, and Norwegian sailing spring of 25 from Australia to the United States. And here's how they compare. Royal Caribbean does it in a single cruise for 25 days. They have 18 sea days and 7 port days. Boo. Okay. Holland America, they do a single cruise, 36 days, 17 sea days, and 19 port days. That's pretty good. Celebrity, they break it into 2 separate cruises.
So you do have to do back-to-back cruises to be able to book this.
And this is 26 days total, 14 sea days, and 10 port days. Now let's look at Norwegian. This is a huge difference. Norwegian does the crossing in 4 separate cruises. Adding those cruises together, it's a total of 55 days. So lots of time on the ship, 19 sea days, which is pretty much the same as some of the other ships there, but 37 land days, which is amazing. 37 different ports as you cross the Pacific. Just amazing. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, this is just completely different, and why we sail Norwegian. Now, another interesting fact that David found out when looking at this is you would think, oh, well, Norwegian is 4 different cruises. It's so much longer. It must be a lot more expensive. But David, was it?
Well, I looked at the prices of the cruises, then divided by the number of days, and per day, Norwegian costs less. Royal Caribbean, $120 per day. Holland America, $183 per day. Celebrity, $117 per day. And Norwegian, only $95 per day.
So this blew my mind. I am just so amazed that they can offer such a better itinerary at a better cost. Now, obviously it's a longer cruise, so if you're looking at the total price, it's still going to be more expensive than the other ones. But that per day cost, what you're paying per day to be there, like, it is more affordable and it is so much better. That is the cruise we would absolutely choose. This is why we keep coming back to Norwegian and why we will keep coming back to Norwegian if they keep offering itineraries like this. Now, I will say, just as a potential con, they did just cancel all of their, or not all of them, but most of their African cruises and their South American cruises going forward. This is definitely a loss, and we're hoping that those itineraries will return at some point in the future. We're gonna have to see what they offer, coming up. But in general, because we always are going to choose by itinerary, and as long as Norwegian keeps offering good itineraries, we're going to keep sailing with them.
Now let's talk about the ship itself. We were just sailing on the Dawn, so that's the ship we are going to talk about. They have refurbished recently and everything looks good, but we will say that I think because of staffing issues, probably, that's where I'm going to put the blame. There were sometimes glasses sitting around in corners, things that we didn't really used to see that often.
Yeah, they used to get cleaned up faster. I just think there's not enough staff to get around and do those kinds of things. So that's a little bit of a change in the wrong direction. Hopefully that doesn't last. But overall, we're still happy with the ship in general. The only other complaint that I have, this is very specific, and I don't know if it's just the Dawn or the other ships as well, but when they did a refurbishment not that long ago, because we sailed on the Dawn several years ago, the carpet used to have little fishes swimming in the carpet. So when you'd walk out of your room, the fishes always swam toward the front of the ship. And so it was just really easy to get your bearings, and they replaced the carpet. I am very upset about this. It's such a small, dumb detail, but it totally annoyed me every time I walked out of the room, or it just took me a while to orient myself. I missed that carpet, but other than that, we think the ships are just fine. Now, another thing we want to talk about is the dress code. Now, again, a long time ago when we first started sailing on Norwegian, one of the perks of sailing with them is they had a very relaxed dress code. They don't have formal nights. You don't have to worry about bringing a tuxedo or even a suit, which is great because as long-term travelers who are traveling just with carry-ons, we don't have those kind of clothes. So Norwegian was always that was a big perk for us and a reason we were able to sail with them. I will say that just recently they have relaxed the dress code even further. So it used to be in the main dining room, you still had to wear pants, and they would say collared shirt, although sometimes I would wear a nice t-shirt that didn't have a lot of print on it, and they would let me in with that, okay, but you had to wear pants. On this cruise, they have relaxed that, and they are now allowing people in with shorts. Whether it's a pro or a con is going to be up to you and how you like to dress. For me, I don't really care. We still pretty much wear pants to dinner. We just feel better that way. But having other people in shorts didn't really bother me, but it definitely is a change that just happened. So one of those things to know. A couple more quick ones. So one, if you have sailed with Norwegian before, for a long time, they have had the free at sea program that is like their drink packages, specialty dining. It's all kind of wrapped up into there. And they have completely overhauled that program, and now it's called the More at Sea. And when I say completely overhauled, I mean they kind of tweaked it. So if you are someone who has sailed with them before and has a lot of experience with navigating that program, and you know how to maximize, and you know there used to be an upgrade you could get, and if you're very used to that, you're probably going to be very aware of the changes, and whether that is a pro or a con for you is going to depend on how you use it. If you are not familiar with it, you're probably not going to notice that much of a difference. Really, for us, we don't use the drink packages. We don't drink enough to buy any of the drink packages, whether it's alcohol or coffee or water or sodas. If we want to buy a specialty drink, we can buy a one-off. So we don't have really real-time experience with it. It changed while we were on board the ship. We did hear some people who had that experience complaining about the loss of certain specialty drinks or packages. And so they had a problem with it, and I didn't really understand what the difference was. So it'll depend on you and how much experience you have with it, whether it is a pro or a con.
Yeah. Now let's talk about shore excursions. Now, in the past, we've never taken shore excursions through the ship.
No, we always do private excursions.
We always do private. And we have heard that they're crowded, that you're stuck on a bus, that you don't really get the time at different locations. So we've always been a little wary of them.
Yeah.
Well, we took our first ship excursion in South Africa to an elephant park,
Yeah.
and it was fantastic.
Yeah, we were so surprised by this.
And we didn't book it until the last minute.
Yeah.
So it was the only excursion that was left. It was one of the lower end excursions. We didn't expect much at all.
Yeah.
And we really had a good time. So I am no longer as afraid of the shore excursions. Good on you, Norwegian, for that.
So we should mention the loyalty program that Norwegian offers. It is fairly robust. There are lots of different tiers, and with each tier as you advance, you get different perks. The program as it is, I think, has been in place for quite a few years. There was a change somewhere around 2020 where they broke it down into more categories. We are, what's our status? Platinum status now, because we have, those nights staying with them. And overall, we're pretty satisfied with that loyalty program. There are a couple of things that have disappeared recently. Actually, one big one is we used to get a bottle of champagne delivered to our room. That no longer happens at all. We get some chocolate covered strawberries, which is nice, but I kind of miss that bottle of champagne. It was just sort of a very fancy way to get welcomed into the ship, and that has just gone away completely. Other than that, we get some free laundry. Overall, status is going to be different on the different cruise lines, and which perks you value and which just don't mean anything to you. But other than that loss of the champagne and the loss of the priority boarding when you get to embarkation on the cruise, there really haven't been any recent changes, just those two, so make of that as you will.
And all of that brings us to what is probably the most important to us, value for money.
This is a tricky one to kind of figure out because, again, we're all different and we all have different budgets. We all have different perks that are important to us, which things we want to upgrade and which we don't care about. But overall, I would say Norwegian is still good value for money. There are still things you can do to kind of chase those deals and find ways to have a more affordable experience. There's a lot of things that you can do if you want to upgrade and indulge a little bit. But once you kind of find your budget, we think Norwegian is probably in line with a lot of the other lines. Now, they do charge more in gratuities than any of the other lines. They're, 10 to 15% more. But like when David was looking at those cruises across, the per day price was still considerably less than some of those other lines. So overall, I would say we still like Norwegian. We think they're making some mistakes at current, and we are going to keep talking about those to make sure they bring back those guest lecturers, they bring back some more staff. I don't know how much of that is going to be reversible and how much of it is just the industry changing, in front of our eyes. We'll have to see how that all turns out. For people like us who have been sailing a while, we're definitely seeing that change. If you are a new cruiser, some of this you might not notice at all. But despite all that, we think Norwegian still offers good value for money. They offer terrific itineraries. They hire amazing staff, and we will continue being loyal. I think we do want to branch out and try some other cruise lines just to have more comparison, but I think we're very happy with Norwegian and we're going to keep sailing with them. But we'd like to hear from you. Would you consider sailing with Norwegian going forward, or are you going to be looking for a different line? Please let us know down in the comments below. We are doing an entire series on cruising. If you'd like to see some of our other videos, I will put a link to that playlist right over here.
Today and not tomorrow.